It's time for In the Trenches. Hello, everyone. Eagles insider Dave Spadaro, along with Brian Westbrook, the Hall of Famer. We're talking about the Eagles' defensive performance against Chicago on Sunday. The Eagles holding on to win the football game, Brian. Did a great job against the run.
Yep.
Did a great job on Tariq Cohen. Stayed with a four-man pass rush primarily. Nothing in the blitz game. Gave up a lot on the back end, though. Overall, what do you think?
You know, it was weird because when you watch the game and you only give up, less than 20 points, you're saying that's a good opportunity, a great job by your defense. But there's some situations as far as your defense, they can play much better. And we're going to have to play much better next week, of course. But in this game, we had to find a way to get a little bit more pressure on Mitchell Trubisky. We didn't do that. We have to play better on the back end. In certain parts in the game, we didn't do that either. We're lucky to find a way to get a win as far as how the defense played yesterday.
The approach clearly was to stop the run, which Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen, non-existent, to limit Trubisky's ability to run outside of the pocket, and they used Nigel Bradham at times as a spy. So the Eagles sacrificing a bit of pressure, believing that Trubisky could not beat them from the pocket.
Yeah, and the way that it worked out, he couldn't beat you from the pocket. I still love a defense that goes and pressures a quarterback, makes his job very, very hard, gets after him. That's just not Jim Schwartz's style. He has in the past used certain players to get out there and blitz, but I think in this game, Jim wanted to cover just a little bit more, not give up the big plays, and he was very successful for most of the game being able to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting because you look at some of the numbers and Trubisky throws for over 300 yards. You go, that's not very good. Not a lot in the sack department. But here's what stands out, and it stood out all year because the Eagles lead the league in red zone defense.
Yes.
The Bears 0 of 3 in the red zone on Sunday, and that, of course, made the difference in the game. Why is this team so good in the red zone?
They buckle down. It's a little bit smaller space to have to guard, but it also gives you an opportunity to get the defenders a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage and closer to the wide receivers. There are times where our defense, they give up too much ground, especially from the cornerback position. They start at 8 yards, and they start backing up on the snap. I just think we have to be way more aggressive. It was a couple times where Maddox, he had great breaks on the ball. If he was a little bit closer in his initial lineup, then he would have had interceptions going the other way. There's just little small things that we have to perfect, and I think as the season goes on, we'll continue to get better at that.
All right, so one thing we saw in this game for the first time, really, Avonte Maddox beaten on the double move, trying to jump routes, make big plays. I really didn't notice it, Brian, during the season. Obviously, the Bears did. So what is the next step here? What is the counter move from the Eagles?
Well, first, I love aggressive corners. I played with Asante Sammy, aggressive corner. He would literally leave his guy and try to go get an interception on someone else's man at times. Lido, kind of the same thing. Those guys were ball hawks. They wanted to get the interception. I think Avonte Maddox is certainly cut from that same type of cloth, but that does allow you to give up some big plays behind you. You have to understand, the safeties have to understand the type of guy that you're going to play with. I think the next progression for Maddox is simply this. We want you to be aggressive. We don't want you to be too aggressive, because when you become overly aggressive, that's when the big plays. We saw it yesterday with Robertson down the field. We can't afford to give up the big plays. We're okay with them catching the ball in front of you and then coming up to tackle them. We're not okay with giving up the big plays behind you.
Another player I'd like to talk about in a really positive way, Nigel Bradham, who we mentioned the spy in a sense, but he had 7 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 passes defensed. I think he's gotten better as the season's gone along, Brian. He didn't seem to be playing his best football early in the year after the big contract, after the suspension against Atlanta to open the season. Your thoughts on Nigel and his play throughout the year, and particularly Sunday in Chicago?
It seemed like he's been working his way up, ramping his way up, and to play his best game in Chicago. And that's the most important time. We need you the most was in the playoffs, and he had one of his best games. Of course, he's very physical in the run game. He's been active in the pass game as well. It's just great to have a guy that can do a little bit of both. We had a guy back when I was playing, Carlos Emmons, that can do a little bit of both. He was physical in the run game and certainly slow guys down in the pass game. Nigel Bradham is probably a better version of Carlos.
Interesting. Three quarters of great defensive football. The Bears score when Michael Bennett keeps a drive alive with a foolish penalty. Trey Sullivan drops an interception in the end zone.
Easy interception.
Cannot do those, Brian. So how do you eliminate those mistakes?
We had 2 opportunities yesterday, and so of course we lost the turnover battle, which is hard to win if you're -2, -2 in the turnover battle. But we had 2 opportunities. Maddox, interception on the sideline,
Yeah.
couldn't get his feet
Yep.
in. And then Sullivan right there in the end zone certainly gave up another interception. That puts us in a different realm as far as defensive play. That helps us out an awful lot. But it all comes down to concentration. Most of the time, a lot of guys say that the defensive backs, they can't catch anyway. But it all comes down to concentration, looking the ball all the way in. A lot of defensive backs, they look the ball in, and then they get their eyes up right at the last minute. Ball's on the ground.
Let's also take a look at special teams and give a shout out in the trenches to Trayvon Hester. Now, Trayvon Hester,
Yes.
cut by the Oakland Raiders, claimed by the Eagles, good quickness inside. And on Sunday, he provided depth as a defensive tackle. And then at the most critical moment of the season, gets that big left paw up, tips the Cody Parkey kick, and it double doinks and out. And that's the kind of play, that's the kind of player that makes a difference. An acquisition during the season who, at the end of the day, helped save the Eagles.
Well, you just got to think about this team and what this team has done over the course of the season, and most importantly, this past game. Big-time plays from guys that didn't contribute much on the offensive side. Dallas Goedert, Golden Tate, big-time plays there. We had some hard runnings by Wendell Smallwood. Then when you look on the defensive side of the ball, Maddox comes back, almost, had a near pick. Sullivan near pick in the end zone. And then you're talking about Hester right there at the end, the most critical time, blocking, getting the finger on that field goal attempt. Impressive to have so many different guys. And these aren't the main guys. These aren't the main starters on your team, the guys that you depend on week in and week out. These are reserve type of guys that went out there and played well, helped us win a football game. That's what you need to have in the playoffs to continue to win and go on.
Yeah, it's taken an entire roster and then some
That's right.
for the Eagles, who remain in the hunt in the NFC. That is our look at the Eagles in the trenches from the 16-15 win over the Chicago Bears on Sunday. He's Brian Westbrook. I'm Dave Spadaro, and we thank you for joining us in the trenches.